Welcome, my dear ones. This is Tracy Anderson Askew, your host for the Transform Your Birth podcast, changing your mind about birth one story at a time. Each week, we'll be exploring a birth story through the lens of what birth can teach us. I'll be digging deep into each story so you can learn what it is that can change the way a birth unfolds. We can't control birth, but we can influence it. So listen in to find out how. Enjoy. Shelby shares her story of two births. When having her first baby as a yoga teacher, people kept affirming that she would likely have a straightforward birth. Her first birth was long. When her baby arrived, she felt disassociated from her new baby. For her second birth, she did some more preparation with the Transform Your Birth course and got herself a doula. She became very clear that the most important part of the birth was meeting and connecting with her baby. This clear focus helped her to adjust to a cesarean. Shelby's experiences remind us that we are not in control, but we can get clear on what is important to us, which can help us to adjust to what unfolds on the day. Enjoy. Welcome, everybody. It's another episode of the Transform Your Birth podcast, and this week we have lovely Shelby. Now, Shelby has two girls. They're 2 and 4.5. And so once again, I love bringing women on who've had two births because we often learn so much from the first birth to the second. So hi, Shelby. Thank you, darling, for coming.
Yes, thanks for having me.
Now, tell us about when you were pregnant with your first daughter. What were you feeling about? How were you feeling about birth? And what sort of preparation did you do in the first instance?
Well, I'm a yoga teacher, so I right away enrolled into a yoga teacher training for prenatal and postnatal yoga to really help me understand how to move my body and everything like that. So that was a really great kind of awakening in 2017. I was going to lots of prenatal yoga classes and kind of relying on my yoga practices, I think, mainly, and breath work and things like that.
Did you feel confident about giving birth?
I was pretty scared.
Yeah.
I didn't know how it was going to go. And a funny thing, a lot of people, I would tell I was pregnant. You know, you kind of take on what people tell you. They'd say, oh, you're a yoga teacher. You'll be fine. It'll be so easy for you. And you know, I've discovered kind of talking to friends or other yoga teachers that, I don't know, we tend to have pretty challenging births sometimes, or some of us have. And I don't know, I think going into it, I had a pretty good mindset, but you just don't know what's going to happen and how it's going to unfold. Yeah. And I was in the midwife program, going to be in the birth center.
Right. So you had your own midwife. Yeah.
Yeah, which is amazing. So it was all pretty new to me. So the reason the seed got planted was one of my most inspiring best friends back in America. She's had natural births or labored without drugs. And that kind of planted a seed. She said, I reckon you could try that, Shelby, because looking at my own birth, my mother had epidurals, you know, it was the 80s.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I understood you did. And I was like, oh, really? You can go in there without drugs and you can do all these other things. So it was kind of a new portal to me that was opened, you know, when she brought that up with me. And she tends to plant seeds like that. So that's where I, you know, got involved with finding a midwife or enrolling in that program. But yeah, we went to the education classes at the birth center, my husband and I, to help prepare a bit, but you know, that's kind of what we did. So yoga, and those classes for the first birth. And it was quite a full-on birth. I don't know if I should start going into
so why don't you go into what actually unfolded?
I think on paper people would read what I went through and be like, oh, I'm so sorry you went through that, you know, because I wanted a water birth because I'm like so connected to water. I love being in water. And I just thought that would be a great place to have her.
Yeah.
And let's see. So I was 6 days over the due date with Ollie. I knew I was having a girl. That's one thing I did for this birth, for the first birth. Yep. I just wanted to know. And leading up, I was getting acupuncture. Because it just felt like she was going to stay in there forever. And I remember my yoga teacher, she came to visit and gave me like this beautiful yoga mala. She said, I think the baby's waiting for you to like communicate you're ready to come. Because I was kind of getting a bit bored and frustrated, as you do. And I went for a walk. I went walking every day with my dog. He's sitting here beside me. But I went out in the bush and I just yelled out, I'm ready, like yelling out to nature, to the trees, like praying, like, I'm literally not ready, but let's do it anyway. And so I started going into contractions that night after a stretch and sweep from my midwife. Yeah. And yes, labor was starting to kick off and they were so intense. I couldn't deal. Like as a yoga teacher, I forgot to breathe. I was sitting there like clenching, tightening. Really not in the best headspace. I mean, there were moments I was managing, I'd kind of fall asleep through contractions, but it was carrying on for a long time at home. And our house was in the middle of renovation. So I was really isolated to like my bedroom. And I don't know, I was kind of keen to get to the hospital because my house didn't feel super nice to be in, but I had a nice continuous hot water shower. That was one thing that was newly renovated. So I sat in the shower a lot with my husband. I really found it was helpful when he was pressing on my hips during contractions. He was getting pretty sore after that. Got to the hospital. Okay, so that started around 9 o'clock or so. It was kicking in and it was all fun and games till around, I think, 8 a.m. I was like, kept talking to my midwife, like, it's just not, they weren't getting close enough together. Yeah. I think they were like 4 to 5 minutes apart and starting to get closer. And then we made our way to the hospital. It was around 4 p.m. that night. And so we got in the bath and it was just really slow. Like nothing, it felt like nothing was unfolding. And I was like in another world. And I got on the gas, like inhaling the gas. And I loved that whistle sound it was doing while I was in the bath. Yeah. And I was in there for ages. I mean, I just loved that it was holding my gravity and it was warm. And, my husband was there the whole time. At some point, at maybe 6 or 7 o'clock, we broke my waters. My midwife helped assist with that. Yeah. And that was like, I didn't even really know what that involved, but I was like, oh, you've got a crochet needle. Like, and my husband got a bit woozy and he was like, I'm just going to lay down. So my midwife was like, you should go get some food. And so he helped himself to some food. And because it's, I guess, a bit confronting when you're tired and hungry. Yeah, he was holding it together. But I started pushing and it was like me forcing everything kind of sometime after that. I haven't really looked at the timeline of it lately, but so she was born by 9 p.m., 9:08 p.m., I think. So it's like kind of a 24-hour kind of going. And it was Father's Day. It was the first day of spring when she came. So September 1st. And so very perfect timing she chose. I had her in the bath and I literally, we're kind of fudging the time, like of how long we were pushing. I'm pretty sure. Like I was pushing. Yeah. And finally, and she had a bit of shoulder dystocia, which, we had some assistance there with her shoulder getting stuck. Yeah. But I was.
Were you still in the water when you were,
shoulder
dystocia? Yeah.
Yeah. I was in the water. We were looking at the mirror and like getting the photos kind of happening. I was like, oh my gosh, like that's her head. I was feeling that. And we were able to push her head out actually when the midwife was going to get more help because she really didn't, there was like no one around. I think there was heaps of babies coming that night. Yeah. And she was like, oh, wow, I should leave more often. Like y'all got the head out. Like, Ollie's head was sitting there, and then yeah, she was a bit stuck, so it's like perfect timing. She came back in and helped with that. And I don't know what caused this, but I had a when she pulled her out, my midwife was like, "You have a 3B tear." And I was like, "Oh," and immediately I've got to be of humor in anything. I said, "At least it's not a 4." Like,
Good look at it.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
And yeah, she placed her on my chest, and they were sorting things. My husband called her, which was beautiful. Who's there, and he was, able to be in that moment. And they placed her on my chest, and you'll look at photos of me, but I was just kind of like, they were like, "Connect to your baby, bond to your baby," and I was like, I don't know what to do. Like, I wasn't around babies that much at the time. I was uncomfortable, and yeah, it was kind of a weird experience. Like, I was in another world, like, yeah, in that thin veil state, and like felt like I almost died, and then I lost, they estimate around 2.2 liters of blood. The placenta wasn't coming out fully. And I can kind of pinpoint like what I focus on for the next birth, but yeah, I just wasn't able to connect with Ollie. Like, I was so excited to meet her, but I just didn't know how to be with her, and and I was like, kind of read things about the breast crawl. I thought, oh, do you breastfeed right away? I was just really caught off guard. And then they were fussing over the blood, and they moved me to the bed. That was so uncomfortable. I had the what's the hormone that they inject? Syntocin, or
Syntocin.
Yeah. And things just went pear-shaped, and she was on there and on me on the bed, and this is like them fussing for a while. One midwife came in, and she says, "I'm the midwife." She pressed on my stomach, and that was not very nice. I was kind of like, get out of my space. Like, don't come in here with that kind of attitude. But at the time I wouldn't have been able to like speak that way. I just didn't know I could kind of get mean mama bear. Like, it's good because I've learned these things for the leading up to the second birth. But yeah, they were trying to get placenta out, and they basically like just put a sponge up there and wheeled me to theater. They were going to remove the placenta in theater. Yeah. So Ollie and I were separated, and she was with my husband, and he was a bit in shock too. Like, oh my gosh, I hope my wife is okay. And here's my baby. Like, what a shock. And
so as you look at that, Shelby, because I know you went on to have a second birth and you started to do a few things differently, but as you look at that, what were the parts that felt like you didn't have the resources to manage? Like, what were the parts that, because this is, women can have all sorts of different births, but when they've got some types of tools or resources or a way of managing the intensity of what it is that they're going through, when you look back, what were the tools that you were using? And was there something that you were able to anchor yourself to, even just to get through that?
I think one thing was like trusting it was all going to work out. Like, I was really disconnected, disassociated. Like, now looking back, that's how I usually deal with things, or I'll black out, or like mentally,
Yeah.
I think I just knew there was like part of this that was all going to be worth it. And, my kind of understanding with that birth was, I was tough enough to handle that, or to go through that. So I was given the birth I was meant to have.
Yeah.
And, I look back at these things, and then a couple months later, I was able to do like a Wim Hof session with this trained Wim Hof instructor. And if you watch how I get into the ice cold water, it was exactly how I handled contractions, or when, the surges were coming. So I learned a lot about like how I face fear. And I'm a snowboarder, I'm a daredevil kind of, I love like pushing my limits, but I don't know. I think it was a mystery, but I let it, there was a reason I had a mystery to it, or I couldn't look at the this is how I'm going to handle pain. Like, I just trust, like, there was a whole piece to this. Like, I did the best I could with what I had.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I didn't have like super set resources. I didn't know what I was going to use. And I found, like, say that ice bath, it really confronts, and you're like, I have to lean on something. Like, I need just one breath. Like, cause when you get into that primal state, it's like you need just one thing to focus on.
Yeah.
And I had too many tools. I'll tell you that. So, like, it was a joke. Like, I had all these oils packed, and like, I was going to use this acupressure ring. I was like, I'm going to do this breath during this time and this breath during that time. And that I had all these formulas, Tracy, and really you just got to have like one thing or maybe two things. And like, I love the quote I came across from Maha Al-Musa. She's a belly dancer and teaches that with pregnant women. I'm sure you might have heard of her, but she says there's only three things you need for your birth, and it's your body, your baby, and your inner knowing. And like, that really stuck with me when I, was preparing for Bodhi. So it was intense, and it set up for kind of an intense time. It was just kind of like learning as I go. And also I didn't have my mother like here, or like my immediate family. So they're all in America. So you kind of isolated and relying on your paternal side or your partner's side. And it's a bit different. Like, I have a really lovely Australian family I'm married to, here. Yeah. But, so I don't know. I just have a big trust. Yeah. So a lot of factors going in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what you've described there is, we can go in with all of the best intentions and the learning, but I think you're right. There's something we need to anchor ourselves to. And certainly in the teachings that we do is very much around your ability to stay calm. And how you do that is what works for you. So you went through that. You felt a little bit disassociated. That then sets up the next phase of parenting. As you look back at that birth, what do you feel like that birth was inviting you to learn to prepare for the next one? What came out of that experience that you...
I think, well, lately I'm studying rebirthing to become a rebirthing breathwork or trainer, facilitator. And a big thing is that dissociation and my perfectionism about things, like, like I have to know all these tools when really at the end of the day, like, you just really need one thing. And for this second birth, I focused on the golden hour because I looked at one piece, like with that retained placenta, like maybe there wasn't oxytocin happening and I wasn't able to know how to bond with my baby. So, even at conception and everything, I was really just trying to connect to whatever soul was going to come over.
Yeah.
Yeah. And envisioning, I did a lot of your... I did a lot preparing for this. Again, like I'm a bit over the top with things. Like, I'm not shy of self-care or doing the things, that I did differently. But like, I was writing down stuff I did to prepare, and I was like, this is really extensive, but that's just how I work. And I'm sure others are like that too. But I do a little bit of everything, and I never choose the one thing. But I focused on the golden hour and how I'm going to connect to Bodhi and how I'm going to greet or whoever the baby is, because I didn't find out the sex. And so,
so with your second, what I'm hearing you say is the most important thing for you was being ready to meet this baby, that golden hour, that imprinting, that moment of, awakening to each other's, to the arrival.
Yeah. I'm like so excited or activated thinking about that. Yeah. The golden hour. It's amazing.
So with your preparation for baby 2, you did the Transform Your Birth course. How were you feeling going into that?
Well, I actually was looking at my notes. I was worried about, like, I had lots of concerns about like how the last birth went, and my breath. I said breath, but how I couldn't breathe. And you shared some beautiful things about that and your meditations.
Yeah.
And it was good for my husband and I to get on the same page and kind of process like a plan. And for him to take part in that was really nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, like we worked out some things during your workshop that like, you know, like light touch. I was like, none of that. Like a couple of things we pinpointed, like that's not going to work. And so it was nice to like just have that day together as well, because my daughter was in care with his parents.
Yeah.
And yeah, just getting excited about this baby and learning some scientific reasonings behind the birthing process and everything.
Yeah. Yeah. So after you did that process of change, how did you feel? What sort of changes did you notice take place in your preparation for this baby? Because you went through a lot with baby number one, and you realised that you really wanted to work with baby number two on that meeting your baby and being in the right space to meet your baby. And then you went through the Transform Your Birth course. You learned more about the science. You learned more about understanding things and doing the practices. What sort of change then did you notice as you were getting ready for this labour?
I think I noticed a consistency, like understanding what works for me and feeling a bit more, we're just going to stick with that. Yeah. And like it really helped me apply things. And I'm looking here like where I was writing like mind blown about a couple things that I was like, oh wow, I've carried this with me today, like rereading some things. But I just really love the tools. You had one about meeting your like the actual birth and everything, and stuff you wrote about, or I learned in the workshop about a C-section, which I ended up having. I had some pre-labor happening around her due date. I think she was due 4th of April, and around like 2nd of April or right after April Fools, it was like, I'm coming. I was getting those some sensations happening. Yeah. Like that pre-labor feeling through the week, like they would kind of come and go, and then they would fizzle out by the morning. I would think, oh, it's on. And we did some spinning baby stuff. And midwife thought, my midwife said, and this is the second time I've had her, so I had her again. But she said, when you're in labor, you're going to know you're in labor. So don't and ah. Like good labor, you'll know. And I was like, okay. And I was trying to really be patient because with Ollie, she was like 6 days over or 7 days. And Bodhi, we were getting to day 7 past the due date. So it was like April 11th. And we were getting Ollie's bed ready. My husband went to IKEA, and I was really grateful for that. Like he went with Ollie to go get the bed ready, and I was having naps. I was having naps every day, listening to like probably your audio, breathing physiology or relaxation. So I'd have like a nap like that every single day leading up to birth, just to rest. And like I was a sleepy mama. So I did that, and the contractions were like starting to pick up. I was like, oh, I'm getting excited. And I'd go in the shower or do something, and they would go away. It was really frustrating, and they just kept coming and going. And I was like, what are you doing? Like, I just need you. And like my acupuncture was to a point like, all right, if you have to come back, like it's free. Like if this doesn't, we were all like, I don't know what's happening. And I was going for a walk like while I was in labor, and I remember like leaning over like this, in my neighborhood, like over these fences, like when the contractions would come in or I'd get the surge, I'd be like, oh, it's coming. And I'd repeat my mantras or my affirmations, like my contractions aren't stronger than me because they are from me, like
beautiful.
Just constantly repeating these. And
these types of early labors where starting and stopping, going on for days, can be very confidence draining for women, because once you get contractions, you feel like, no, this is it. This is, we're on, and it's not like that for every labor. Sometimes labors can start and stop. And sometimes they can just be very gentle and go on for days, which can really cause women to lose a lot of confidence. So what was this whole thing inviting you to learn, Shelby, about this? What did you ultimately have to do with this labor?
I think it was surrender and just, it must have been holding on to something still, you know?
Yes or no, it can be like these, but these sort of labors can be caused by just purely the positioning of the baby. It's the pressure of the baby's head on the cervix, which releases the pulses of oxytocin, and the more pressure, the more oxytocin, the stronger the contractions. So if a baby's floating around and they're not really putting those sorts of pressures on, it can cause labor to start and stop. And it can also be an indication of babies being a little bit obstructed, not in an ideal position, and not necessarily creating the right mechanics to open that door. So part of this is, you know, recognizing we are not in control. We can influence at best, but we do have to exercise patience. And even the idea that I was overdue is not really a thing, because your baby comes when your baby comes. The zone is typically 37 to 42 weeks is when a baby is due. And any time in that is seen as being right on. You know, there's overdue is probably over 42 weeks, and early is before 37 weeks. But that must have been incredibly difficult to keep your mind in the right order and to deal with the disappointment that, you know, when's this going to happen? Yeah.
I called my midwife, or no, my doula, I know, that night. And I was like, I just give up. Like, it keeps coming. Like, like I'm losing hope. I know she'll have to come out eventually, but I was so frustrated, and it was good to just express that. Yeah, because it was tiring too, you know.
Giving voice to that is really important. I think it's helps you to release it from your body. So when did it really kick into gear? Tell us about that.
So that evening, actually, finally. And so it was like she had to outdo her sister, you know, by a day. It was that evening, it was kicking in. I think by midnight, they were getting quite close together, and my midwife told me to get in the shower and called my in-laws to come over to stay the night with my daughter. So they were setting up their bed, and then my doula came over. I think by 3 a.m. we made our way to the hospital, because I was like, I forget what it was, but something told me, like, you're not having your baby at home. Like, it wasn't going to happen. The drive there was pretty rough, because it was like the first night of winter, like getting cold. It was April. It was the first frost was that night. I was like, are you kidding? Wow. And I remember I was like, wow, I can use my voice a lot better in this birth. Like, I just knew what was happening, which was great. I'd get the shivers after contractions, and I brought this beautiful blanket. That was like waterproof and like splash proof. It was amazing. So it was good for births. I bought them for that intention. And I'd be like, put the blanket on when I was like cold. And then I'd say, throw the blanket off, I'm hot. Like, I was able to communicate a lot better. So I think maybe all this stuff I've done helped me in communicating. And I said, I don't want exams. Like, I just want to trust that it's happening. And I was in the bathtub. And I had to agree to my midwife actually before, like, that I couldn't have, I think the OB got involved and said, like, looking at my case, that I wasn't allowed to have a water birth, which kind of pissed me off. Like, you know, that was something that kind of panged my system a bit. Like, I have to be good this time in my birth. And that's kind of something you carry along. Also, like, so anyway, that was like kind of in my mind, like, okay, I have to get out of the bath at some point. But I was so relaxed. I was in a deep like meditation, like talking to Bodhi, or this future baby, like, okay, we're going to work together. And I was singing a lot to her. This song I kept singing, Please Prepare Me by Beautiful Chorus, just singing like to be a sanctuary. I would sing. And so I had all these beautiful things that I'd learned to employ, that I just dropped in. I was able to drop in and not think about, okay, what do I need to do next? And also the doula was there, like, everything was beautiful, set up. And And also my word for my birth, I'd written a vision board, and this is what kind of I had, and I took it with me to the hospital. That's like the placenta's out perfectly. I was envisioning that, like the placenta comes out whole. And I had a picture of my newborn Ollie, like to fall in love with and remember that feeling.
Yeah.
And softening intensity with my breath was my other thing. So I really like had these tools, and having that vision board is really nice just to have that one thing to focus on.
Yeah.
But it just kept progressing, and it was that position like at the end of the day, Tracy. So I recalled when I was in labor, and because it was around 8 a.m. and my midwife was about to switch off. We're going to get a new midwife in. I was like, that feeling like, okay, I've been here a long time.
Yeah.
Trying all the positions, bouncy ball. We'd broken my waters again. So yeah, we're getting down that route. They were starting to monitor more. And I was like, oh shit, here we go again. Like this isn't. And I knew I didn't want assisted delivery. I didn't want forceps. I didn't want Kiwi cup. So I was a C-section at that point. I was like, just get her out. And so they took me into what's the other ward called? Out of the birth center into the
birth suite. Yeah.
The birth suites. And I was like a wild animal. I remember getting down there. I got to 10 centimeters dilated, and I felt the fetal ejection reflex kick in. I was like, she could just come out. Like, it was like, whoa. And they're like, try to not push. I was like, I'm not going to stop. And I was yelling, and, I was really confident in my body and the process, but I was like, where is this baby? And they would check, and they were like doing the scans. And I was finally getting on some drugs because I'd been in this for a long time, like even pre-labor, like that whole day before and the whole week. Mm-hmm. I was tired. I was mentally checking out. And anyway, but I was focused on like, I'm going to meet Bodhi. I'm going to be there for that. And I already felt relief. Like when they did the spinal block and the morphine, I remember being like, woo! I'm happy to like relax finally. But the ejection reflex was still going, which was so wild. They were kind of panicking about that. And I was like, this is what we do. I was sitting there like, I'm a woman, like, here I go. Like, I was feeling like that goddess energy, like, yeah, what? I can't stop it. And they were like, she's too high, or it's too high. So we are going to do the C-section. And I was like, woohoo. And my husband was getting ready during that, so he wasn't with me. I think the doula wasn't allowed to be in there at some point when they were getting the theater ready, and he was rocking up to not know whether I was going to end up with the assisted delivery or the C-section. So it was kind of like surprise. And like my anesthetist, I can't say that word. Anesthetist. He was like a dreamboat, so friendly and like just an angel in that room. And they were playing, like, how a C-section or the theater can be a bit informal and there's bright lights. But I think these things I'd written from your, detour about the C-section are really employed. And I just tried to enjoy it, like, and see the light in it. This is funny. Like, I'm going to meet my baby soon, so it's all good. And I was like, y'all better not tell me the sex until like you're lifting that baby. Like, I'm the one finding out. Like, don't even mention it. Show her to me. And I kept repeating myself, kind of like a drunk person would probably. I just kept saying that, like, let me see. And he said it'll take like an hour, but he meant like the whole process. But I was like, when am I going to meet this baby? And anyway, they pulled the curtain down and got her out. My husband was there, and I was like, it's a girl. I was so excited. I was so excited to meet her, like, finally. And I was like, it's Bodhi Blue. And my husband's like in shock. He couldn't even, like, after everything I'd been through, because I was like in my power. Like, I did it all before she came, and they just placed her on my chest, and I was singing that song to her. And like, when they're on your chest, you like, I don't know, she was getting up into my face. I'm like, oh, this is a bit funny. Like it was all just kind of joyful. Butterfingers Fig Jam was playing like that. And Powderfinger, My Happiness, like they had just random pop music. And I used to formerly like have to control every song that was playing or my play, but I was like open to whatever. Like, here we are, C-section. But it was truly golden hours, like just me and Bodhi. I was connecting, like, you know, your arms aren't able to move, I think. So she was just there. And I'm just sitting there like nuzzling into her. And it was like just profound, and I was like so in love. And I remember with my first birth with Ollie, like I don't know, just the connection after it was beautiful. And I did have that again with Ollie, but this one, like I knew what to do, I knew how to be with the baby and like trust my instincts and have the boundaries. This was like right before COVID was kind of getting crazy too. And I also went into this birth thinking, what if I have to birth her alone with no doula, no husband? So also in the back of my mind is like, it's going to be me and baby. Like it's me and her or whoever till I find out. Me and baby. So let's do this. Like I knew I could do it no matter what.
So you had your golden hour with this one.
Yeah. Everything.
What do you think
was smooth?
I mean, you went through a lot second time round as well.
Yes.
To get to that point of meeting. Why do you feel it was different second time round to what it was first time round in terms of your meeting her? Her?
Well, I guess it's the experiences I've had, like learning how to bond with Ollie, my first one, and knowing I didn't want to be separated from her like at all. And that whole pregnancy, like leading up to, I was trying to connect with her and talk to whoever was in there and communicate and let them know my voice. And I think I'd urge every pregnant woman to like just focus on connecting to the baby. Like that is the biggest thing. Because no matter what happens.
It's about. It's not about having a birth, it's about having a baby. And women have got to walk the path that they've got to walk. And you had two big births, which could be very overwhelming and cause your whole transition into motherhood to be really, really tough. And yet you were able to get through the first, you were able to get through the second. And what I'm sensing from your story, Shelby, is it's very much around finding those anchors of what's the most important thing in this, and not necessarily getting hooked on, you know, do you have drugs or not? Is it a vaginal birth or a cesarean or natural birth? Like I don't even personally prefer to use the term natural birth because it makes it sound like that's the right way and everything else is substandard, when it's every birth is its own unique experience that is the welcoming of a child. And so it's really interesting to kind of connect the dots of learning, of the little things you are learning and picking up and changing and working on within yourself, and then be ready for baby number two and to go through that process too. So as you look back now, what have you learned about yourself, Shelby?
That to have like a deep trust and be able to communicate your needs and find what works for you, and like trusting those feelings or those notions that come up. Really connect to your baby, focus on meeting your baby, and like that is the light at the end of the tunnel. I would walk through this tunnel every day in my house, and it was almost like the birth portal. Like it's just I'm gonna get to that other side. It might be scary, you know, coming through, but I'm only gonna be given what I can handle. And every baby comes with a lesson, I suppose, to imprint on me forever, to learn from, so I can choose to grow from it. So I always chose to grow and be unwavering. That was my word, like unwavering in whatever happens. Like just dedicated to meeting my baby. Yeah.
Mm. And what would you tell a pregnant woman?
Get to some of Tracy's classes. No.
Thanks.
But yeah, that's a start.
Nice little plug.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think you just got to tune into, like, maybe stalk your fear a bit. Look at what scares you and like figure out how would you diffuse that, or how would you move through that.
Beautiful. Well said. Nicely summed up.
Yeah.
So thank you, Shelby, for sharing your two amazing stories, both big births, both long births, both really pushed you to the edge. Your first experience was a lot. It was a lot. And yet you were able to get through that. And the thing that really was the part that became the most important to you was the hour after birth, was the meeting of the baby, that golden hour. And that became the guiding light for your second birth. You realize that, simplifying and really hooking into tools, not too many tools, but things that you can anchor yourself to, along with your own trust that you can get through it again. And then ultimately having to go through a cesarean birth, which is a whole different experience, and yet really embracing that, like not resisting that, seeing that once again as part of this baby's birth. And then having what you didn't get the first time, really protecting and engaging and relishing that hour with your second baby was what was important, the most important thing to you. And I would say to the people listening to this, this is what birth is about. It's not about having a birth, it's about having a baby. And the birth is what activates us to be ready to meet our baby. And so, yes, birth matters, but it's not the type of birth that matters. It's what gets activated in the mother so that you can be ready for that big journey on the other side. So thanks again for sharing your story, my darling. It's been so good having you.
So good to talk to you again.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah.
And we'll be back next week with another episode. So tune in. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please subscribe and share this podcast. Transform Parenting is a childbirth and parenting education organisation that supports families through pregnancy all the way through the first 7 years of parenting. Why not watch our free webinar on Keeping Relaxed and Excited About Birth, where we discuss the 3 most important things that will change a birth. You'll find us at our website on www.transformparenting.com.au. Thanks for listening.